Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and welcome back to this next video. And this is the part 2 on the sex determination. In my last video, I've told you that there are many ways in which sex differences arise, and there can be two type of the organisms. One, they are known as the hermaphrodite, where an organism have both the male and the female reproductive structures, and they are also known as the monoecious organisms. The hibiscus plant, the earthworms, and the sea slugs, there could be examples from the hermaphrodite family. Then we have got a dioecious organism, where an individual has either the male or the female reproductive structures. And among the dioecious species, I've told you that the sex of individual, they may be determined chromosomally, genetically, or environmentally. And I gave you the holy plant and the human being as an example from the dioecious family. Then we started our discussion on the chromosomal sex determination, and I've told you there are different kind of the systems for the sex determination using the chromosomes. And the first system that we discussed, that was the XXXO system. And I've told you that in some species there is no Y chromosome at all, and the presence or the absence of the second X chromosomes that actually decide the sex of the individuals. For example, if you talk about the female, so the female, they are going to have two X chromosomes, and the male, they are only going to have a single X chromosome. And this O, that was not referring to any chromosome. This O actually stands for the absence of the second X chromosome in the males. And we talk about the grasshopper and the cockroaches as an example from the XXXO system. And we talk about their meiosis, what happens during meiosis that leads to the female and the male individuals. Then I've told you about some of the important points, that there is no SRY gene in the XXXO system. Sex determination is controlled by the number of the chromosome, not by specific genes, and that it is a primitive mechanism of the chromosomal sex determination. In this particular video, I want to focus on the second type of the sex determination system using the chromosomes. And this particular system is known as the XXXY system. Now, when you talk about the species, there are many species where the cells of the male and the female have the same number of the chromosome. In the XXXO system, the number of the chromosomes, that was different. Female was having two X chromosomes, the male was having a single X chromosome. So the male are actually one chromosome less than the female one. But in the XXXY system, the males and the female, they are going to have the same number of the chromosome, but not the same type of the chromosomes. For example, if you talk about the female, they are going to have two chromosomes, the two sex chromosomes, and both of them, they are going to be X. So female are going to have two X chromosomes. When you talk about the males are going to have one X chromosome and one Y chromosome. So the number of the chromosome is the same, but the type of the chromosome, they are different. Now, this Y chromosome, that is usually called is the Y chromosome, but that doesn't mean that it is actually looking like a Y. This is actually an acrocentric chromosome. And if you look at the structure of the Y chromosome, it looks like this. So this is not a perfect Y. This is actually an acrocentric chromosome. The most famous example from the XXXY system, the dogs, they are one of the example. The cats, they are another type of the example. The cattles, they are following the XXXY system. And we, the human beings, we also follow the XXXY system for the sex determination. When we talk about the meiosis, how the males and the female, they are selected, how the male and the female, they are formed. So if you talk about the female, they are going to have two X chromosomes. When you talk about the male, they are going to have a one X and one Y chromosome. During the process of the meiosis, the gametes that are formed by the female, they are homogametes. By that I mean that all of the gametes that are formed, they are going to have an X chromosome. So they are the homogametic. The females in the XXXY system are going to be the homogametic. When you talk about the meiosis of the males, they are not homogametic. They are going to be heterogametic. By that I mean that half of the gametes, they are going to have the X chromosome, and half of the gametes, they are going to have the Y chromosome. So we are talking about a heterogametic individual. So the sex of the individual, that is going to be determined by which type of the gamete, the male gamete, that fertilizes the egg. So this is actually the gamete of the male that decides the sex of the future offspring. This is not the female. This is actually the male gamete, which is going to determine the type of the sex. For example, if the X chromosome, any of the gamete having the X chromosome, if that comes from the female, from the egg, if that combined from a gamete from the male containing the X chromosome, so the sperm is also having the X chromosome. So when these both X chromosome they combine with each other, you are going to have a female. But if the egg, again containing the X chromosome, if that combined with the sperm containing a Y chromosome, that would mean that there would be one X, there would be one Y, and you are going to have a male. So the male is going to determine the sex of the future individual. Now, the X and the Y chromosome, they are not generally homologous. They are homologous at small regions called as the pseudo-autosomal region, in which they carry the same genes. So structurally, they are not homologous, just like the autosomes present in the human beings, for example, but they are homologous at very small regions, which are known as the pseudo-autosomal region, and because of this, they are going to pair during the process of the meiosis. If you talk about these human beings, as I've told you, female have got two X chromosomes, the male have got an X and the Y chromosome. So what is special about this Y chromosome that makes the individual as male individual? If you look at the short arm of the Y chromosome, you are going to see a particular region which is known as the sex determining region. And the sex determining region is going to have a specific gene which is known as the SRY gene. And this gene is Y linked because this is only found on the Y chromosome and not on the X chromosome. So, what is the specialty of this SRY gene? So, this SRY gene that is going to encode a transcription factor. This transcription factor, they are going to initiate the development of the male gonads, like the testes, and the subsequent development of the male characteristics during the embryonic development. So this is the Y chromosome, which is responsible, this SRY gene, which is responsible for the formation of the testes and hence the male characteristics. What that means is, as the X chromosome do not have the SRY gene, the females they do not have any Y chromosomes. So in the absence of the SRY genes, female development occur by default in the human beings. If you look at the karyogram of the human beings, starting from the chromosome number 1 moving up to chromosome number 22, if you look at them, they are very much similar. They are homologous to each other. But if you talk about the sex chromosome, so in females, both they are X chromosome, but in male one is X and one is Y chromosome, and you can see a very clear difference between the size of the X and the Y chromosome. Y chromosome is a very tiny chromosome containing a very little number of the genes, but because of the pseudo-autosomal region, they do pair during the process of the meiosis, and hence they are segregated during the formation of the gametes. In my next video, I'll be talking about the third system of the sex determination based on the chromosome, which is known as the ZZZW system, which you usually see in birds.